Chances are at some point in your life you've been stuck. Maybe it's now. You've been stuck as a human, as a worker, and as a leader. Today on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, we're going to help you get unstuck. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is brought to you by the Future of Work newsletter. Every week, you'll get articles, resources, and tools that will help you, your team, and your organization be more successful in the ever-changing remote and hybrid work environment. Learn more and sign up at remarkablepodcast.com/FOW. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Let me ask you an obvious question. Have you ever been stuck? Have you ever felt stuck? And no, I'm not talking about your vehicle in the mud or snow, although I've been both of those. Today, we're going to talk about being stuck and, more importantly, getting unstuck with our guest, Craig Lemasters. Craig is a former CEO of a $5 billion, with a B, Fortune 500 subsidiary. He's an author, entrepreneur, investor, and board member with more than 2 decades of success in executive leadership positions, and now has dedicated his life and work to helping senior leaders get unstuck on the major growth challenges of their businesses. He is now president of the Puerto Rico-based strategic investment conglomerate Grupo Ferre Rangel, as well as the chairman of GXG, an Atlanta-based consulting firm dedicated to helping senior leaders get unstuck. As we just said, he speaks to a wide variety of industry and leadership audiences around the world with a focus on helping organizations more effectively navigate the journey from strategy to execution. His recent book, Unstuck: How to Unlock and Activate the Wisdom of Others, dives into his journey as a CEO and teaches us as readers how we can leverage his methodology to tackle our pressing business challenges. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Craig, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Kevin, and congratulations on your Spanish there. We've got some work to do, but it's a good start.
I guarantee you, there's a lot of things, Craig, in my life that I have work to do. And if I'd have been smarter and more on top of it, I would have confirmed that with you before I started.
No, it was actually very good. And no, thanks for having me, Kevin. To be a part of any show about remarkable leadership is a real privilege for me. So thanks for having me today.
I'm glad to have you here. I usually start with this question. You know, when I started this podcast, Craig, I said, what are the things I try to ask smart people when I meet them? And then how do I integrate those into the show? And so there's a couple of them, one sort of at the start of most episodes and the other one at the end. The one at the end, you already know. I told you that one was coming. But the first one is sort of, tell us about your journey. You didn't wake up when you were 8 and think your life would turn out this way. Probably.
Nope.
So the book talks about your journey of being stuck at Assurant and all that, but just in general, give us sort of the arc of your life. Sort of how do you end up being where you're at right now?
Yeah. So like everybody, Kevin, I mean, and I completely agree with you. The people that tell me they predicted their journey are usually not super accurate. So I did not.
That's nicer than saying they're lying.
Well, exactly, not super accurate. But so my journey is I just started with this small company in Miami. Long story about how I kind of got there. Is literally my second job after working for Citicorp, big bank back in the day, and actually a really good company back in the day. But I bump into this company and I ended up staying there 27 years. So from a professional standpoint, my journey is both super boring because, I mean, who works for a company for 27 years when I do live talks? So I can see particularly a younger audience looking at me like, you know, you're a freak show.
Well, they're not even 27. Let's be serious.
Well, that's true. Most are, but it's kind of fun because, and I tell people the reason I stayed there, even though this was a $600 million small cap public company, the reason I stayed, and this was one of the first lessons I learned about leadership, is this chairman, this guy who had started, it was a second generation company. He gave a bunch of us 25 to 30-year-old kids, literally, amazing opportunities to start to build and ultimately run. I mean, I was running little P&Ls at 28 years old. I mean, who gets to do that today? I mean, it's very, very rare. And so I just kept almost every year, got a chance to do something new and different, stayed another year, stay here, had other opportunities. And so that's what I ended up doing. I missed a meeting apparently, and somehow got picked to be CEO. And I got to run a big company for 11 years, actually, which is pretty long in terms of CEO tenure these days. And I tell people I was actually in Houston with a public company yesterday, helping them, and they related to this because I said, yeah. I said, well, how long were you CEO? I said, well, it's exactly 44 quarters, right? I mean, that's kind of how we measure our tenure as a public company. So that was my professional journey. And I just had no reason to do other things. I mean, we got to grow globally. I talk about that in the book, about our digital work, which was amazing. And then to conclude the story, because again, that's the 27 years. And then I did a bit of an odd thing and told my board that at age 55, which is about 5 years ago now for me, I was going to leave. So it was about a year before that. And I actually did that. And a lot of my friends were super curious, like, why would you do that? And the company was doing well, had an amazing succession group, which I'm super passionate about. But all I wanted to do was, I believed I had some amazingly wise people help me, especially the last 5 years, solve very complex problems. I was stuck, to use my own vernacular. And we built this methodology the last 5 years that worked so well. It was kind of like, why not go help other people with that? Now, here's the funny part. I know nothing about advisory consulting, didn't even like using consultants, the traditional.
Yeah, you sort of talk negatively about that.
Oh, not negatively.
Which I agree with.
I'm just balancing it. It's interesting knowledge, but it doesn't really help us get unstuck, okay? And so I try not to be a complainer. I thought, well, if this really worked, why not start your own advisory firm and see if you can help others? And so we did that 5 years ago, and it's been a blast, Kevin. I've been very blessed that the methodology started sinking in. We started helping big companies, which is what I knew. We moved down the food chain all the way. We're even helping early stage companies. And this is why I love the tagline of what you do, helping organizations and leaders really reach potential via remarkable learning approaches. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, God, I got to be on this guy's show someday, because that's all I'm doing is just sharing a way to learn that's so dramatically simple but different than what we do. So I've been doing that for 5 years. And then the bizarre thing happened, final piece of this. About a year ago, got approached by a private company. Never knew anything about private companies. By the way, they're really big. Actually, private companies. So this big private company who's a client asked me to help them out and run their company for the next number of years. So my team at GXG teases me that I went out and got my own part-time job. So that's my journey. And I tell people,
you were bored. Apparently, I don't think you were, but anyway.
I wasn't bored.
I know.
But the team was doing great, and they're actually done better without me staring at them all day and stuff, I suppose. But I tell people all the time, and I mean this to wrap this up, is that I've been super, super blessed in my work journey to get to run an amazing big company, get to build my own smaller company to share something I'm passionate about. And now I get to run a private company, and I have nothing but gratitude about my little journey. So that's my story.
All right. Well, we're going to stick to that, and we're going to move on from that. So you wrote this book called Unstuck. So I want to actually start by saying, what do you mean by stuck?
Yeah.
I mean, I opened by saying you've probably been stuck. We sort of know, but kind of tell us what you mean by that, because we can be stuck personally. We can be stuck as a team.
Absolutely.
We can be stuck as an organization. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. And newsflash, the things I share in the book and I can share this morning or today are applicable to any of the stuckness in our life, if you will. And all I mean by it is, and I have some fun with it. I did it to be a little provocative, mainly because we don't like to talk about stuff that's not working great. I mean, it's a hard topic. So I just started doing this intuitively, like, hey, because I did it in my own CEO role. It's like, gosh, I'm stuck on this, I'm stuck on that. So when I started this company, I just started asking CEOs, what are you stuck on? Everybody gets a little offended. Usually they're like, oh, we're not stuck on anything. What does that mean? So all it means
is they're being, what did you say earlier? Less than What was the word you used?
Yeah, a little less than candid.
There you go.
Yeah. But what you said earlier is the definition, actually. And I actually used to use this in my talks as a picture of a pickup truck stuck in the South Georgia clay mud. Okay. And the reason is the truck is still moving. I mean, it gets through the mud. It just takes forever. And that's what stuck is for me. It's not that we're not trying. It's not that we're not working super hard. We're actually doing all those things. But guess what? We're not getting to the goal line. And so it started to get obsessed with this. It's like, when does this happen? Why does it happen? And is there a way to get out of this cycle? And when I landed on it, that's why I couldn't resist leaving a pretty good job to go do this work and tell people about it. And like I said, I've been doing it for 5 years, but that's how I think about stuck.
So let me add to the metaphor, at least from my perspective, because growing up on a farm, I have been stuck. I've been stuck with tractors and stuff bigger than a pickup. And here's the thing. What people do, everyone, is they try to go faster and they make it worse. Yeah. Right. So when we really start truly spinning our wheels, we're doing stuff. We're burning fuel. We're doing stuff. We're trying. Yeah. But it doesn't actually help. We have to almost always, when we're literally stuck, slow down before we can fix it. And absolutely. So we're going to get to that. I'm going to have you to talk about your 4 steps in a second. But first, you open the book with a formula, a very simple formula. Yeah. And I'd like you to share it with us because, and so if you're listen to me talking like I'm in Georgia with y'all. I love it. If you're listening right now and you can get your pen out, it's just going to take a second, right? And if you're not, pause it and get a pen. Okay. So tell us the formula, Craig. Yeah. So I start the book with the answer to all this to not keep the suspense, but the way we get unstuck is this idea of unlocking and activating the wisdom of others. And so I kept getting asked, well, what do you mean by wisdom? My definition of wisdom is this unique combination of both knowledge and experience. So the formula is W equals K times E. And I started using that 5 years ago and it just stuck, and people tended to write down the formula. And it's very important to me because when we're in, and you just described with your tractor example, what I call the circle of stuck, which is what we do in business. And we can dive into that if you want to, but we're in the circle of stuck. What I found is it's very hard to break out. And the only thing so far, and I challenge people all over the world now to give me a different, better answer, but the best way to break the circle of stuck is by this bolus, this interjection of real wisdom on the topic that you're stuck on, not like all-knowing, some Yoda wisdom, right? Which probably, who knows? We don't have to go to the mountain, is what you're saying?
I don't think the answer is in the mountain. And guess what? The answer is not in a 350-page deck of information, right? That's some pretty good knowledge. But where this gets exciting and game-changing stuff, Kevin, is when you bring in wisdom that has both. So we've got enough knowledge about it, we've actually done it, and you facilitate that conversation correctly. That's the secret sauce. It's super simple. I write it in the front of the book because I don't want to keep people waiting. Now, how you go do that, how you identify it, how you find it, how you facilitate it, there's some work to do there. And most of us aren't very good at it. That's why I built this little firm, is if you do it correctly, the speed at which you can get unstuck is kind of mind-blowing, actually.
So, okay. So you've told us about the formula. You've given us the very big picture. Yeah. But you really, the book really gets at a process, right? 4 steps. And I think you say it accurately in the book that you don't really have to use us to get there. We may be able to help you and know that you can, but as before people get their copy of the book, and we are talking to Craig Lemasters about the book Unstuck, how to unlock and activate the wisdom of others. Before you get your copy, Craig can give you the 4 steps at a high level right now. So what are the 4 steps for us as organizations, as teams, and as individuals to get unstuck?
Yeah. And let me just say, Kevin, everything I'm going to share right now is my own story, my own experience. Again, I'm not a trained consultant, academic. A lot of that work is very helpful. This is wisdom-based stuff I'll share with you. And then my body of work the last 5 years, which is, hundreds of really cool companies around the world. So the 4 steps, again, I like to keep things super simple, as you've probably already picked up on. But here's what works. Number one, leadership team has to have a very high humility quotient. Okay, I talk about, give a whole chapter in the little book about humility. Without humility, we're not going to admit we're stuck. And more importantly, we're not going to allow outside wisdom in. Okay, so step number one is humility. And I can't emphasize, we've actually passed up business opportunities because the C-suite or the CEO in particular may not have the humility that we want to see to make our stuff work. Okay, so number one is humility. Number two is we have to define the destination. It's shocking to me how many companies, and even really, really good companies, brands you would know, everyday brands, that just don't have clarity around the destination. Okay, I call it A to B in the book. Again, I think we overblow this. We can spend, millions of dollars in consulting help to do this stuff. Your team, we should be able to do this in a couple of hours on a whiteboard. And so that's what I would propose. So step number two, though, you got to know where your B is. And again, I want to be really granular here, Kevin. I'm not talking about change the world through this kind of thing. That's a vision. I'm talking about, I have my little coffee cup here. I'm a coffee company and I want to make pens. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So if making pens is your B, that's fine, right? When, how many, we really push for granularity. So humility, the destination. And then the third, which is super important, is we actually draw this learning ecosystem. So if the new thing I'm going to go do, my destination is a pen maker, I'm going to put whatever that detail is about the pen in the middle. And we're just going to do an ecosystem, which is actually identifying the wisdom gaps. And again, this is, I know this is going to sound really simple, but it works, which is just say, if we look at the organizational wisdom, knowledge and experience, how much of it do we have in the company today to make pens? Oh, and by the way, what are the 3 or 4 circles, if you picture an ecosystem, what are the 3 or 4 circles of wisdom that are imperatives to be a really good pen maker? Okay, this is straightforward. You'd be shocked how many companies never do this stuff. Right. And so what happens is we put those circles around the middle of the pen, we start to get this very clear picture of, wow, we can go do this. Or, you know what, we've got some wisdom gaps, as I would call it, we have to fill. So once we know the gaps, then the next part is you got to go fill them. Okay. How do we do that? You have to be granular. Again, what I'm looking for, if being a great pen maker is to make ink, then I want to know the granularity of the wisdom is required to know how to make ink. So I want to go find wisdom, a person. Again, when I say wisdom, it is people. It is a person that has amazing ink knowledge and experience. And then the last step is, once we've accumulated those people, we use like a little board format. We usually only need 2 or 3, depending on how the complexity of the topic. But once I got the ink person, I don't know much about pens, the clip person.
It's working. It's working.
Right? But you get the idea. But once I get these wisdom people, I put them in a room and we call it activate. Well, it's a fancy word. All it is we're going to extract that wisdom on the pieces you're stuck on because you only knew how to do a couple of things. And now we're going to take their wisdom, because they've already done those component parts, and literally within hours pull together the pathway to get to B, right? And again, it's not a hypothetical, it's not an academic, it's not a research-based pathway. It's actually people that have made the ink and made the clip and made the top. And guess what? You can do that very fast. And the reason we can do it fast is it's the right wisdom in the room. So those are the 4 steps.
Well, and
super simple.
We can get there because we started by knowing where we were trying to go.
That's right. Yeah. Don't underestimate it. Again, we have clients, and our company was okay at this. Sometimes we knew exactly, but I would argue, Kevin, and you probably see this a lot as well, most don't. Or if they do, it's pretty high level. I have an advantage in this work because I ran a big company, moved up in the company. So at every level, I got to learn this stuff. So I'm not going to let people get away with the big picture, platitudinal kind of, here's my destination. It's like, it doesn't work. we're going to get really granular, but you're exactly right. If there's humility, we understand the destination, and then we're honest, candid about those wisdom gaps, game over. We're going to solve it quickly. And that's the beauty of wisdom. And let me just say one thing, because I get a lot of questions now. We've got amazing case studies and a lot of happy clients, which we're super fortunate that invite us back for all kinds of work. But one of the things that really, I think, surprised me, if you will, when I got into this, that half of the answers we end up getting in these meetings come from the wisdom already in the company.
Yeah.
And there's something magical almost about bringing in outside wisdom that puts everybody at ease. Like, we're going to do this together.
Yeah.
Right.
And then allows people to pop their head up.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, we go to our clients, that this is going to happen. About half the answers are inside, half are not. And every time we finish an engagement, I get that feedback. It's like, wow, I had no idea that Sally knew that. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. Now you do, right? And she's going to be part of changing this in the future. And it gives me great joy, because I spent my life, and again, this is where I was always challenged with the big consulting firms, because that role and again, they provide a lot of value, just not this kind of value, because they come in as the smart group that tells everybody then what to do. Usually it's repackaging a lot of our work already, but that's the hypothesis. And it ends up being a very negative experience for most of us. And again, I've done this in talks all over the world, and I get a lot of head nodding. Right now, be candid, board of directors love this. It's a bit of an insurance policy. It validates things. Again, I have nothing against that.
No, it's about what's the place.
Yeah, right. So, but what I want is this joy-filled relationship with these wise people. And now we own it, right? Because we've done it together, and then it just tends to take off the actual work. So it's actually a super fun process. And the number one thing I'm grateful for is, we've only been at it 5 years, but we've been invited back to every client we've worked with, and most of them multiple times, which was my dream in this space, was that there would actually be an advisory consulting methodology that people wanted to do and wanted to be a part of. But that's how the 4 steps work.
So I want to go back. I interrupted you. I didn't mean to. A minute or two ago, when we were talking about Sally, who I didn't know Sally knew that stuff, and that's actually an indictment to all of us as leaders. So I want to underline that for all of us is yes, we can do what Craig's doing, and yes, when we bring people in from the outside, it changes the dynamics of the meeting, no doubt, 100%. And as a leader, we should be looking for, engaging with, offering space to people to find out what they already know, who they already know, what wisdom they already have, and the ideas that they already have.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And let me give you a hypothesis. Again, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't pretend to say I can fully explain why this happens, but I have a pretty strong hypothesis. And it's about being biased versus unbiased. I think what happens to Sally, because I was really good at this, the leader of the company comes in and says, hey, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to talk about strategy of the future and all this brainstorming. But what I was really good at was taking groups, sometimes large groups of people, and just convincing them to do what I wanted to do to begin with. And I would argue that
called it brainstorming.
Yeah. Under the guise of, we did the brainstorming. We'd spend days sometimes, but I always got what I wanted. Now, that's what I would call bias, right? And I think leaders actually should have that. I think why our methodology changes the game is the leadership that we actually sell our programs to have to be participants. So we're facilitating to get to be, and it drives them crazy the first few hours. But all of a sudden, when the Sallys start to pop up and they've got these amazing answers, why? Because again, we're in an unbiased format. Right. Because these outside wise people they love our work. We have this huge network now, people that do this work with us. They're working, they just do this because it's an amazing experience. But you think about it, they are completely unbiased. They're not there looking for a job. They're not trying to get promoted. They don't care what the CEO, they've just met the CEO. They could care less what their bias is. They're there because they have a swim lane of wisdom that's amazing. right? So you can imagine the sparks going off. I mean, these rooms are just, flooded with this unbiased, candid conversation. And that's why we get to the answers so quick.
Yeah. In a safe space, right?
It's all it is. Yeah. I mean, there's no agenda other than getting to the destination, right? That's what the bias does. We just bring all these other agendas in the room.
So you and I are having this conversation in July. No one else is going to really hear it till at least November. And of course, we don't know when people will hear it. But what we do know is that we have all lived through this thing called a pandemic.
Yep.
And so my question would be, how has the pandemic changed our stuckness? By the way, I had already decided to use the word stuckness, so it made me giggle when you used it earlier. So what have you noticed in your work with clients about how the pandemic has either made this worse, harder, or easier, better, whatever? Like, what's been the impact?
Yeah,
the pandemic on our stuckness.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, Kevin, and again, most of our work always comes back to growth. I want to help companies grow, and it's around the execution of growth. And there's lots of great McKinsey data that came out that 75% of companies don't know how to grow after the pandemic and don't believe they have the internal way to figure it out. So isn't that interesting? And what we found, it sounds like a lot like your business, ended up growing dramatically, particularly the second half of last year. And this year has been even better because more people are stuck. The second thing that happened, which just makes me smile, even though it's been hard, it drove a level of organization and leadership humility that I've never seen before. I mean, nothing like a pandemic to bring people to a place where, maybe I can't predict the future, right? Maybe my business model can go away overnight. I probably ought to think about this a little differently, right? And you're an exception. You were sharing some of your story before we started about how you pivoted to remote learning way before the pandemic. It actually got criticized by some, it sounds like, because why would we do that? Well, who knows? You didn't know there was a pandemic. What you did know is we've got to do some different things in the future. And you had the humility to say, my business model that got me here may not be the future. Most leaders don't do that. Now, I would say the pandemic changed that. And we see great humility in our clients and prospective clients. So those are kind of the two changes. A lot more stuckness and a lot more humility.
A lot more humility in the clients that we both want to work with. We'll just leave it at that.
That's right.
So before we start to pivot and start to move toward the close of this conversation, Craig, and I know that you and I, whether it was on recording or not, could have a very long and interesting conversation. But is there maybe one thing that you wished I would have asked or thought I would have asked that I didn't?
No, I mean, you're super good at this and very, very thorough. The only thing I would point out, and I loved where you started, if you're questioning whether you're stuck, check out, it's a really simple book. It's literally a 108-page book. My friends tease me relentlessly that I'm not smart enough to write more than 108 pages, but it was actually by design. It started out at 300 and it said, everybody only reads a third of every business book. So I thought, well, why not just make it a third? But check out, I have a picture in there called The Circle of Stuck. And it's a fun little way to diagnose whether you're actually stuck. And it actually gets into the behaviors that happen in companies that are pretty funny individually, but I drew it in a circle for a reason because this was my
We end up where we started and we just keep doing it, just like the tire.
We just keep doing it. So that'd be the only other thing that I'd encourage people to check out.
So it's on page 25.
There we go.
The Circle of Stuck. Yeah. And for those of you that are listening, we are so glad that you listen, but you do know that you can watch us. And if you watch, you can see this picture.
There's the Circle of Stuck.
Right there it is, the Circle of Stuck. So we would love to have you watch us, but we're certainly glad that you're listening. So Craig, you talk about it near the end of the book.
Yeah.
So I know that I think there's a bunch of reasons why it's good that you and I are connected. And one of them is this point, because every guest I ask this question and you talk about it at the end of the book. Here's the question. What do you do for fun? You said in the book that your criteria for a client is this going to be fun? Will we have fun doing this?
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah.
Work ought to be fun if we do it right.
Absolutely.
But what do you do for fun when you're not working?
Yeah, I'm a sports fanatic and of all types, and a bit of a health nut and things that I enjoy doing. So that's kind of how I spend my time. But I got the best compliment only a couple of years ago from my wife of 34 years now, and she said, it's pretty cool when you go charging out the door every day. I can never know whether you're going to play tennis or go to work. And I thought, what a blessing that is, that when you do find and get to do something you're passionate about. So, and I'm super competitive, Kevin. If we were live in person, I'd race you to your front door when we're done. I'd probably lose, but I'd still race you.
Well, it's all stairs, so it's probably a one at a time scenario. So another question for you, and the only one I told you ahead of time. Which is, what are you reading?
Yeah, so I am rereading actually some work that I teach as a part of our practice, particularly our coaching practice, which is Angela Duckworth's research around grit. Fortunately, she's written a book now that's a very simple read, but I met this stuff, over 17 years ago when it was just papers and really complicated and a lot of empirical data. And I would encourage your listeners and viewers, if they haven't studied this, do it. It's the single most, I think, highest correlation of success, however you define that we have. And there's millions of ways people want to talk about it. This has worked for me. It's why I actually teach it. So I would encourage people to study the grit topic. It's a gift for yourself, for your organization, for your family. We've used it with our 4 kids. So I'm constantly revisiting that, and there's a lot of tangential work around the grit topic. So I would encourage you to do that.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So now the question you've been wanting me to ask from the very beginning, where can people learn more about you, your work, the book? Like, where do you want to point people? Great.
Yeah, I know our website, we put a lot of content up, gxg.co. We share lots of cool content and case studies. Again, I wrote the book because, and I had some friends that said, it's why would you patrol business model? I want people to do this, whether we can help you or not. You can go do this on your own. We tell you how to do it. We do it more efficiently, but that's the best place to find us. And love if you want. We put a lot of content out on LinkedIn, so that's a good spot to find us as well.
All right. You can find them at LinkedIn. You can find Craig at LinkedIn. And I hope that you'll do that. So awesome. Now a question for all of you who are watching or listening, and that is, now what? I ask you this every week. Okay, what are you going to do with this, everybody? Maybe you need to spend some time thinking about if you're stuck or where you're stuck. Maybe you need to start thinking about your own humility quotient. Maybe there's something else. Maybe it was one of the very last things that we said, which was asking yourself the question, is this fun or not? Those are just a couple of things that I wrote down. The reality is, though, the value that you will get from this will come from your action. Yes, it starts from your listening, but you've got to, as the book says, title says, you got to activate something. You got to take action. I hope that you'll do that. And I know that Craig does as well. Let me, before we sign off, Craig, let me just close by saying that today's episode is brought to you by Remarkable Masterclasses. You can learn more about our Remarkable Masterclasses, an updated format to how people do those and see those, a new topic, a new skill each month to help you become the leader and human you were born to be. You can learn more at remarkablemasterclass.com. And so, Craig, thanks again for being here. It was a pleasure, such a pleasure to have you. We've been waiting to do this. We finally got to it, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. You're a pro, and I love your body of work. You're making a big impact, and real privilege to be with you today. So thanks for the invite.
You're welcome. And everybody, we'll be back next week. We will be. I mean, if this is your first week, you're about to find that out. But if you've been with us before, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.